Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another video on the channel. Once again, as you can see, I'm not in my familiar setup, but you guys already know this. Today's video, we are continuing the trend of analyzing every single one of the contenders going into this season to Arsenal's crown. And today's episode is about Manchester City. And after the Community Shield final and the bomba news we got from Fabrizio today, a lot of things have changed. If you guys are new to the channel, welcome. If you're a returning member, welcome back. If you guys are enjoying the content you're seeing on the channel, I'm gonna try and get you guys videos as consistently as possible. So if you wanna be here for the ride, make sure you subscribe. Hit the post notification bell so you never ever miss out on a video. Support the channel, that's the only way this channel can grow. I cannot do it without your help. So please, support the channel, it's free. Now this Manchester City video, I kinda had a plan for how I was gonna approach this video coming into things, like days ahead, because I'd kind of planned out all these videos in advance and what I was going to talk about and the signings that the team has made and the new introduction of the manager and what the manager is going to bring and whether the team will be able to continue the expectation they had from the previous season. But after today, things have changed. And the Community Shield final is not a huge game changer in my opinion. It's not a game that makes me sit up and think, okay, perhaps I need to change my perception of Manchester City. In my opinion, I don't believe the game today is the most important thing in the world. Firstly, it's a Community Shield game. It's a friendly, it's a glorified friendly, right? It's still very early in the season. You're coming up against an Arsenal team that is very stable. They know what they are. They're under Mikel Arteta. Their depth is insane. They have an incredible squad of players. And Manchester City are still figuring out themselves under Enzo Maresca. It's a new manager. It's a new look team. Of course, a lot of the players are still the same from last season, but when a player or a manager like Pep Guardiola and a player we'll come on to talk about that are as influential to success as we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years leaves the football club, of course that's going to have a huge impact. I didn't expect the impact to be the huge difference in quality we saw between Arsenal and Manchester City that we saw in today's game, but I think it is something you need to take into account. It is something you need to take into account. And the big elephant in the room that needs to be addressed is Pep Guardiola. Will Manchester City this season be able to find a way to win again without Pep Guardiola? I mean, Pep Guardiola has been a mainstay. He's been part of the furniture at the Etihad Stadium for 10 years now. Of course, Man City won with Pellegrini, they won with Mancini, but when you have a manager who's as influential as Pep Guardiola, not just in Manchester City, but in the sports in the country, it's very hard to build again. You've seen it with Arsenal and Arsene Wenger. You saw it with Man United and Sir Alex Ferguson. It's not easy. So Manchester City, when they appointed Enzo Maresca, a lot of people probably weren't as enthusiastic about the appointment as maybe Manchester City themselves were. And I was one of those people. I believe Enzo Maresca is a good manager. I also want to apologize to all my Chelsea fans for my video in the Chelsea, my comments in the Chelsea video where I talked about how Enzo Maresca was kind of kicked out of the football club. I've actually come to learn that it was him that really pushed for that move away from the club, and it was him who was flirting with Manchester City while he was still employed to the club. So I apologize for not knowing about that. And that changed my perception on Enzo Maresca as a manager because yes, he did good things at Chelsea, yes, he had good elements, and yes, his team was starting to build, and Chelsea were a team you never wanted to play against in European competitions or even in any knockout competition for that matter. But when you have a manager who behaves in that sort of manner, it leaves a sour taste in the mouth. No matter what you win as a manager, whether you won the Club World Cup, whether you won the Conference League, it's always going to leave a sour taste in the mouth. So I understand why Chelsea fans don't particularly take to Maresca, despite the success he brought to the team, right? So now coming to Manchester City, as I said, I don't want to look too deeply into this Community Shield final because it's one game against an Arsenal team that know what they are, and Pep Guardiola has just left the club, and Enzo Maresca has just come in, and it's a new look team. I don't want to look into things. But you look at the performances today of a lot of those players in that team, right? And as I said, I don't want to look too deep into it. But it's going to be interesting to see how Enzo Maresca is able to platform this team to win again, right? Because a lot of people will tell you that this team, their minimum is second place, right? And I think coming into the season, that was my understanding. That was my belief that irrespective of what Enzo Maresca does with this team, their minimum is second place. Because I look at the teams around them and I don't believe they have the same quality as compared to Manchester City. I look at a team that has players like Erling Haaland, people like Phil Foden, people like Rodri, right? We'll come on to talk about him and his move to Barcelona. You look at players who have even left the club, There's a lot of quality in that Manchester City team. And even the players they brought in recently, Semenyo, Ryan Cherky, Aït-Nouri, Tijani Reinders, who looks like he's on his way out of the club. Even Mark Guéhi. There's a lot of quality in the squad, but I feel like when you have a manager like Pep Guardiola, albeit he was kind of declining towards the end, there are certain things that are allowed to fly tactically that I don't think any other manager is able to accommodate. I'm looking at someone like Matheus Nunes playing as a right back. Manchester City this entire summer never looked to sign a right back. That was never a priority for them, and I don't understand why. Today you look at someone like Kusanov playing at right back. Why is that the case? Like, again, it's still early, it's still preseason, they're still figuring things out. But Manchester City haven't even gone out to sign a right back. Does Enzo Maresca even identify Matheus Nunes as a right back? Or does he see him as a midfielder? Nico Riley, the same thing. Rico Lewis, the exact same thing. We saw at Chelsea that he played with those inverted fullbacks and then the wingers would play out wide and you'd have like 4 people behind the striker. We didn't see any of that today. Jeremy Doku, a striker, or a player who's been allowed to kind of, I don't want to say go scot-free, but when he has seasons where he only scores 5 to 6 goals or 5 to 8 goals in a season, it doesn't really matter because you know that other players are going to contribute because the tactical setup is so robust. And Erling Haaland is always going to give you the goals. And Kevin De Bruyne is always going to give you the goals. And Phil Foden in his yesteryear is going to give you the goals. But coming into this new era, Jeremy Doku cannot be allowed to have the same 5-goal season that he's had these last few years. Antoine Semenyo cannot be allowed to do the same goal pinching that you had with Pep Guardiola, where the chance generation is just so high and is at such a high volume that someone like Semenyo probably doesn't need to create as much. Even a player like Phil Foden, I'm looking at him, he needs to have a great season this year. He's not a kid anymore. Phil Foden is 26 years old. He's not a kid anymore. He's about to be 27 next year. This is not a player who's still in his formative years. This is a player that should be entering his prime. Yet you still watch him and you don't really know what his best position is. Is he a 10? Is he a winger? Is he an attacking midfielder? What is he? Is he a second striker? Because it really doesn't matter where you play him in, he doesn't look comfortable. He doesn't look like the Phil Foden that won PFA a few years ago. And then you look at the amount of players that have left the team, right? The John Stoneses, the Nathan Akes, the Bernardo Silvas. And of course, these are all players that probably needed to be shifted on. But have Manchester City replaced these players? Even Rodri, right? And we'll come on to talk about Rodri separately. Because I feel like these players, you could afford to lose these players and still kick on again next season. Maybe not win the title, but you could still compete. Especially when you go out and sign players like Elliot Anderson for 120 million euros. When you make those sort of signings, fair enough, you can kind of allow it. And when you're exploring the likes of Buadi and Enzo Fernandez, 2 players who, in my opinion, I don't think it's warranted going out and spending 100 million on either of them. I look at Buadi, yes, he had a good World Cup. Yes, he looks like a promising player. But the guy is 18 years old. He just had his first full season in major footballing competition, major European football last year. Are you really going to shell out 100 million euros on a player who's just broken into top-level European football and throw him into a Manchester City team that's rebuilding under a new manager in a new era when he has players around him who are still figuring things out themselves, like an Elliot Anderson, like a Nico Gonzalez, like a Kovacic, who somehow is still playing for Manchester City in 2026. So it makes you wonder, what is the plan? Because those players that they've lost, they add so much experience, and I think you needed that sort of experience when you have a new manager coming in like Enzo Maresca. You needed that sort of experience. Of course, there are still a few players in the squad who are familiar with what it means to win in Man City. Erling Haaland, for example. Phil Foden, for example. These are players who know what it means to win. Even Gianluigi Donnarumma, perhaps he hasn't won at Man City, but he knows what it means to win as a player in general. Ruben Diaz. These are players that are going to really have to step up this year. They're really going to have to step up because it's a huge, huge miss, those players. And it's a huge miss, Pep Guardiola. Because Pep Guardiola, sometimes I think we underestimate what Pep Guardiola did as a manager. Sometimes he can really hide the weaknesses in a lot of football players. He can really hide the weaknesses in a lot of them. And I think if Enzo Maresca is gonna have any success in this job, he really needs to lean on those players who have been there and done it. I'm looking at a player like Erling Haaland. He's gonna need a Phil Foden to tie his laces up and rediscover that form from a few years ago. He's gonna need Jeremy Doku to score more than 10 goals. He's gonna need Antoine Semenyo to have a creative bag. He's gonna need Ryan Cherky to do a bit more than just razzmatazz here and there. He's gonna need a bit of output. He's gonna need a bit of output. So it should be interesting to see. As I said, this is a big opportunity for Enzo Maresca. It might seem daunting now, especially after that big defeat. It might seem daunting, but Enzo Maresca is a good manager. Is he good enough to replace Pep Guardiola? We'll have to wait and see. I don't believe he is, but would anybody have said Mikel Arteta was good enough to replace Arsene Wenger? Nobody would have said it at the time. So you have to give the man time, you have to give him a platform, and they've given him money. And with the signing of Elliot Anderson, as I briefly talked about earlier, I think it's a great signing. I think Elliot Anderson is almost everything Manchester City need in this midfield. He's combative. He's able to dictate the game. He's able to control the game. His long passing is brilliant. He can find passes in between the lines. He's a willing runner. Everything Man City need in this midfield, especially in this era of the Premier League where everything is so physical and sometimes your technical ability is not really that important. I think Elliot Anderson gives you a great blend of the two. He can play as the 6, he can play as the 8. Very, very complete midfielder. But I think a lot of people, when they made that signing, for the amount of money that they did, the idea was that Elliot Anderson alongside Rodri Hernandez is going to look like a proper player. I think that was the belief. But now after you hear the news that comes out today about Rodri, him moving to Barcelona, that will be a whole separate video on its own. I'll come and talk about the positives for Barcelona, what it means for La Liga, what it means for our Champions League aspirations, what it means for Manchester City. I'll talk about that briefly here as well, and what it possibly might even mean for Arsenal. But Rodri leaving Manchester City is massive. If you thought before Enzo Maresca was going to have a hard time replicating or even mimicking in any way what Pep Guardiola did, in any way what he was able to build in those last 10 years, in any way challenge Arsenal for the title, now that Rodri is gone from this team, that task has become 10 times, 20 times, 50 times, 100 times harder. Because not only does Rodri give you that control in the midfield, not only does Rodri give you that calm in the midfield, not only does Rodri allow you to play a certain way, he's a manager on the pitch, but he's a manager off the pitch. He's a leader off the pitch. He has that winning mentality. He's been there with Pep Guardiola. He's been there with Kevin De Bruyne. He's won with these players. He knows what it means to go in a title race. He knows what it means to go to a Champions League semi-final. He knows what it means to win the World Cup with Spain. He knows what it means to be the best player in a Euros winning side. That's what Rodri gives you. And losing a player like that, and as I said before, now you're looking at Buwadi and Enzo Fernandez as your possible replacements for that. Mate, it could be a very, very spooky season for Manchester City. Before, I had Man City in a different category to the rest of these sides that I've made videos on. Tottenham, City, United, Chelsea, Liverpool. I had City in a different category to the other four. I saw City as a clear-cut second or third, with those other four kind of vying for the other positions. But after the departure of Rodri, and now as I sit back and really understand the scope and the project that Enzo Maresca has on his hands, this thing could genuinely go in any direction. You could have the positive outlook where Enzo Maresca could figure things out. He could rediscover that brilliant form we saw at Chelsea. He could go on to be this great manager. Nah, you're good, man. He could be this great manager. He could go on to be this brilliant manager in Manchester City. Or this guy could struggle under the pressure. The pressure could consume him. He could not be able to get the players on his side. And in that moment, those players completely lose faith in him. Then what happens next? If Phil Foden doesn't rediscover that form from a few years ago, if Jeremy Doku continues to give you a bit of shimmy here and there but no real end product, if Antoine Semenyo continues to lack creativity, if Erling Haaland continues to get starved up top, if Ruben Diaz continues to play at the poor level he's been playing these past few seasons, what happens then? If Elliot Anderson struggles to really get a grasp of that midfield without a Rodri next to him, or without a proper midfielder alongside him, Nico Gonzalez, I'm looking at him, what has he turned into in this team? A player they bought for £60 million. No one talks about him anymore. He should be the replacement for Rodri. But it looks like they're going out to buy another player. So there's a lot of question marks, but there's also a lot of good aspects, as I said. Man City could definitely go on to be great this year. They have all the players, they have all the pieces. But at the same time, Enzo Maresca has a big job on his hands. Coming into this, as I said, I was of the belief this should be smooth sailing for Man City. I don't think they'll win the title, but I also don't believe they will fall off a cliff, akin to Arsenal and United after their generational managers. But after the loss of Rodri, and once I really start to pull my head around the situation that Enzo Maresca has to deal with, there's no certainty surrounding what could happen with Man City this year. As always, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. What do you think Manchester City could go on to do this season? I'm on my way to the airport right now, so I'm trying to get this video out to you guys as soon as possible. Thank you guys so much for watching. Next video that will be out will be the Rodri video, and I'll be in a whole new place. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, take care of yourselves, and goodbye.